Okay, so here's where we left off yesterday. We subtracted the whole problem. We wrote down all of our steps, but we did not write down how to borrow. And this was the part that a lot of you were confused on. The questions from our homework, 2, 6, and 8, those were all borrowing problems. So here is how we borrow. So let's write to borrow. So if you need to borrow, meaning you can't do 4 minus 15, you can't do a number minus a bigger number. In order to borrow, you need to take 1 away from the whole number. So you need to take 1 away from the whole number, which is why the 5 became a 4. I took 1 away. Does that make sense to everyone? Yeah. Whole number just goes down by 1. And then what you're going to do, that's step 1. Step 2 is you are going to take the denominator and add it to your numerator. So take the denominator, add it to your numerator, which is why we did 20 plus 4. Denominator's 20, numerator's 4, 20 plus 4. That's your new numerator. I know that sounds complicated, guys, but that's probably the easiest way to teach you. There is another method you could do, but honestly, it takes longer. It's actually a lot more math involved with it. So this is like the short version of how to do it. So if you can figure it out and get it down, it'll only benefit you. So let's do another example in our notebook. I'm actually going to take one directly from the homework assignment you guys just did. Can I go to the next page? Are we done writing that? Because I got to move. So wherever you want to write, guys, we're going to do example number 2 in our notebook from the homework. Okay, so I'm going to write example. Here's the problem we're going to solve. 3 and 1/2 minus 2 and 2/3. Now try to do this without looking at your piece of paper. But what do I need to do first? What's step number 1? 2 and 3, you guys, everyone find the least common denominator, the least common multiple of 2 and 3. Lindsay, what is it? It is 6. So I'm going to keep my whole numbers. I'm going to change my denominator to a 6. Keep my subtraction sign. Keep my whole number. Change my denominator to a 6. Kaden, how do I get from 2 to 6? Times 3. So what do I have to do on the top?
Times 3 is in the 1.
Which is?
3.
Perfect. So my first fraction becomes 3 and 3/6. Ella, how do I get from 3 to 6? So what do I have to do on top? So I do 2 times 2, which is what, Ella? 4. Is any of us having issues with that step? Are we doing okay with that step? Okay, I'm making equivalent fractions, aren't I? That's all I'm doing. It's equivalent fractions. It's what you did on your homework. Yep. It's what you guys did on your homework. So now ask yourself the question, can I do 3 minus 4? Not without getting a negative number. And are we working with negative numbers? Nope. So we don't want negatives. Eventually we'll get negatives, but you're not there yet. You'll do that next year, okay? So 3 minus 4 I can't do, which means I have to do what? Borrow. What was step 1 with borrowing?
Take 1 away from the whole number.
So take 1 away from the whole number. So the 3 becomes a
2.
So cross it out and write a 2.
Then,
And what does step 2 tell me to do?
Add 6 plus 3.
Take your denominator plus your numerator. So 6 plus 3 is?
9.
And what's the 9 become?
The numerator.
So you cross out the 3 and write a 9. Now, can I do 9 minus 4?
Yes.
What is 9 minus 4?
5.
And what's my denominator?
6.
And what's 2 minus 2?
0.
So what's my answer?
5.
Now, I know you did this yesterday, but I think, for my sanity on my emails, you had a trick yesterday of finding the common denominator.
Oh, yeah.
Could you explain that to them again? Because it's not always the multiplication, because if it's like 3.5 minus 1 1/4, some of you guys are putting that 8 is your common denominator, when actually it should just be 4. And some of you forgot that. And I know Mrs. Osmond told you a trick, or gave you a strategy, or try to help you out so you don't always have to make it harder. And that's exactly what you're doing. You're making the problem a lot harder when you are just so can you
Yeah, like here. Let's
Thanks.
do this
Thanks.
example. Here's what Mr. Swanda's talking about. 3 1/4 minus 2 3/8.
That's it.
And it was just like your 2 questions on your bell work today. Your bell work questions were exactly the same.
So some of you are saying the common denominator was least common denominator was 32.
Because 4 times 8 is 32.
You got that, right? You understand how we got 48 or 32? Excuse me, right? Right. Okay.
Now,
However,
if you are having issues, can we still do 4 times 8 is 32?
Yeah.
Yeah, but what are you going to have to remember to do at the very end of your problem? Simplify. And I think a lot of you are forgetting to simplify because we've been getting that least common denominator. We're not simplifying in our notes because that least common denominator makes it so we don't have to simplify. We're cutting out that step. So if you don't get the least common denominator, you will have to simplify. And a lot of us are forgetting that. And that's a lot where we go wrong. So when I see 4 and 8, I ask myself the question, first things first, does 4 go into 8, you guys?
Yeah.
So if 4 goes into 8, what's my least common denominator? 8. I do not have to change both fractions. If I only have to change one, let's only change one. That makes my life a little easier, right guys?
correct.
So that's kind of what Mr. Swanda's talking about, is make your life simpler. Don't make it harder than it needs to be. So I'm going to have 3. I'm going to change that 4 to an 8. How do I get from 4 to 8? And whatever I do to the bottom, I have to do to the... So 1 times 2 is... And then I get to do what with my second fraction? Nothing. I get to keep it the same. That's awesome, isn't it? Now, can I do 2 minus 3? Which means I have to do what? Borrow. What's the first step of borrowing? Which makes the 3a. Then, McKenna, what do I do? Take the denominator and do what? So I take 8
That's how
plus
you
2, which is what, McKenna? 8 plus 2 is 10. And what's my 10, everyone? My numerator or my denominator?
Numerator.
So I'm going to cross out that 2 and write a 10. Is that making a little bit more sense with that borrowing? So now subtract. What's 10 minus 3, you guys?
7,
What's my denominator?
8,
And 2 minus 2 is?
0.
So 7/8 is my answer. Because
You look
we found our common denominator was the least one, which is why we didn't have to simplify. If I would have done 32 or 16 or 24, 'cause that's what they all go into, I would have had to simplify. So that's all Mr. Swanda is saying, is so then you don't have to simplify in the end if you find that least common denominator. Does that make sense, everyone? Okay, let's try some problems on our tables.